Welcome to our new Applique tutorial. The tutorial is divided in two parts, Applique with an embroidery machine and Applique with a regular sewing machine. But what's an applique? An applique consists on pieces of fabric in different shapes and patterns sewn onto a larger piece of fabric to form a picture. On plushies, you can use them for color changes that are in straight lines or that don't match with any seam, or for parts where the embroidery would be too big, so you just use fabric of the desired color. You can use it, for example, on cheeks, for marks. We will start with the embroidery machine applique. If you do not own an embroidery machine, you can skip to minute 11:23 for the sewing machine part. Let's get started. The first step is designing the embroidery file for the applique. First of all, draw the shape you want for your applique. We chose a heart because it has curves, straight lines and angles. Draw it with a straight seam. With a stitch length of around 2.5 or 3 millimeters. Once you have the shape you want for your applique, duplicate it and change the new one seam to a regular satin stitch. We recommend a density between 4.5 and 5.8 stitches per millimeter, and a width of at least 3 millimeters. We used a 4 millimeter width. Also, change the color of the applique so the machine stops between each step. Once our design is ready, save it and put it on the embroidery machine. Now let's prepare the hoop. For an embroidery machine applique, you will need the base fabric and the fabric you want for the applique, which will go over the base fabric. Tear-away stabilizer or interlining, the hoop, of course, and scissors. There are embroidery and applique scissors that work great because they're meant for cutting small pieces. You'll also need pins. You can also use fabric spray glue. This is optional. It's not in the video, but if you're working with Minky, you will also need a water-soluble stabilizer film to put it on top of the fabric. This is to prevent the fur from sticking out between stitches. Now you have to hoop the stabilizer. This is the same process you should follow for a regular embroidery. If you're not using the glue spray, you should also hoop the fabric on top of the stabilizer now. Once it's hooped, it's time to apply the glue spray on it. We put some tape over the hoop because the spray makes that all the minky fuzz gets sticked on it and it's hard to clean, so the tape avoids that to happen. It's totally optional and just a thing we personally like to do. Remember to use the spray on an open and ventilated area. We use it on the balcony. Well, the hoop is already sprayed. You can see it's sticky. Once ready, put the base fabric over the stabilizer. Be careful not to leave any wrinkle and that the fur is in the direction you want. Gently press the fabric to make sure it's all glued to the stabilizer. After that, Put the applique fabric over the base one and pin them together. Again, make sure there isn't any wrinkle and that the fabric is tight. The hoop is ready, so let's move to the embroidery machine. And here we are! Select the embroidery file of your applique. Put the hoop in the embroidery machine and let it sew the applique's shape. Remove the hoop. You can see that now the two fabrics are sewn together with your desing's shape. Go back to the work table, remove the pins and carefully cut the applique fabric. Be careful not to cut the thread and that you cut as near the seam as possible. Make sure to cut as much as you can, because if something isn't cut properly, it will stick out on the side of the embroidery. It should look something like this, close to the seam without any loose bits. Now grab the water-soluble film. We didn't show it properly before, so here's the one we use. It's Madeira Wash Away Abalone film. Cut a piece big enough to cover your design and pin it on the fabric. Make sure there are no wrinkles. Go back to the embroidery machine, insert the hoop and let it make the satin stitch. If you cut the applique fabric properly, it shouldn't stick out of the embroidery line. Now you just have to remove the pins and the water-soluble film. You can tear it away and then wet the fabric for a couple minutes to remove all the film remains once it's out of the hoop. Unscrew the hoop, remove the fabric and stabilizer and tear it away. Some stabilizers are too thick to tear them off, so in that case, just cut them near the embroidery. And with this, your embroidery machine applique is done. Now let's move to the sewing machine applique. For this, you will need a sewing machine, of course, base fabric and applique fabric, a pattern of your desired applique shape, which in our case it's also a heart for an easier comparison to the embroidery machine applique. Now this is optional, but highly recommendable, tear-away stabilizer. You will also need scissors, pins and a glue spray to stick the stabilizer to the base fabric. You will also need a wash-away stabilizer film, which will prevent the fur to stick up between the embroidery stitches. We use Madeira Abalone film. The first step will be to glue the stabilizer and the base fabric together with the help of the glue spray. Put it on either the stabilizer or the wrong side of the fabric. We recommend to do it on the smaller piece of the two, which in our case is the fabric. Remember to use the spray on an open and ventilated area. We do it on the balcony. The fabric is already sprayed, and as you can see, it's very sticky. Put it over the stabilizer and be careful not to leave any wrinkles. With the palm of your hand, press gently to make sure it's glued to the stabilizer. Another option is a stabilizer that sticks to the fabric when you iron them together. Or you can always pin the stabilizer to the base fabric too. And it's done! Now grab the applique fabric and pin it over the base fabric. Make sure there are no wrinkles left and that the fabric is tight. Once the fabrics are pinned together, take the pattern and mark it on the applique fabric. We use an air-soluble fabric marker that disappears over time. The design is marked on the fabric, so it's time to sew it. First, we use a basic straight stitch, the one you use for regular sewing. Sew over the line. Do it slowly to make sure anything moves and that you follow the line properly. but you can always unstitch any part where you moved away from the line and sew it again. Now that you have the applique design sewn on the fabrics, remove the pins and cut the outside applique fabric away. There are scissors aimed for embroidery and applique that are short and perfect for small and precise cuts. Cut as near to the seam as possible, but be careful not to cut the thread. Make sure you cut as much as you can, because if something isn't cut properly, it will stick out on the side of the embroidery. Take the wash away film and cut a piece big enough to cover all the applique area. Pin it to the fabric. Again, try not to leave any wrinkles. It's time for the embroidery. Turn your sewing machine on and select the zigzag stitch with a width of at least 3 mm and the distance between stitches of 0.2 to 0.5 mm. In our case, we chose a width of 5 mm and a distance between stitches of 0.3 mm. Now start sewing slowly. This part requires a lot of patience and concentration. Don't rush or sew too fast, or there will appear empty spaces in your embroidery. You can see that we were sewing at minimum speed. The video is not slowed down. You could use a hoop for this part, but we are parting from the base that the person that needs this tutorial doesn't have an embroidery machine, or their embroidery hoop is too small for this, so we won't use it. Make sure the seam is in the center of the presser foot to make the embroidery as clean and close to design as possible. And after a lot of sewing, it's done! Now remove the pins, the water-soluble film and the stabilizer. You can wet the applique for a couple of minutes to remove all the remains of film. Let's now compare the results. On the left, the applique made with the embroidery machine, and on the right, the one made with the sewing machine. As you can see, the one made with the embroidery machine has a very regular and clean shape. On the other hand, the one made with the sewing machine looks a bit irregular and asymmetric, especially on the right curve. Also, we can have thinner stitches on the embroidery machine without problems. but with the sewing machine, the thinner, the easier it is to look irregular. In conclusion, the embroidery machine will always give a good result since it only depends on the design and if you cut the fabric properly or not, while an applique made with a sewing machine will depend completely on your sewing ability and patience. Anyway, we got good results in both cases. We hope you have enjoyed the tutorial. Please don't doubt on commenting what do you think about it, if you like the explanations, if you understood all the process, or if you have any doubts about something. Also remember that you can suggest any ideas for future tutorials and we'll happily make them for you. See you next time!